Time again for another installment of the basics, and we're finally moving back into the Star Trek CCG. And on today's show, I want to talk about the Q icon cards. Now, I've touched on some of these cards in previous episodes, but I've never actually done a full episode on the Q icon cards. So here you go. Let's get right down to it, shall we? For anyone that doesn't know much about the Q icon cards, they came out with the Q Continuum expansion, which was the second overall expansion for the Star Trek CCG. The Q icon cards in some ways replace the other cards of the same classes, which would be dilemmas, interrupts, and events, and bringing them out as follows with the Q flash. So basically what you can do is either these things. Place atop Q Continuum side deck during the seed phase. Q Continuum is now open in play. That means in your Q Continuum side deck you can also stock Q interrupts and Q events. Or seed under any mission like a dilemma. Any crew or away team encountering this Q flash must experience X amount of cards from opponent's Q Continuum, where X equals the number of personnel present. Again, that could be any cards in your side deck. That may also include the Q icon cards, either the interrupts or the events. Or you can stock the Q flash in your deck and play to nullify a Q icon card if your opponent's trying to do the same thing. Otherwise, you would use them like their counterpart card types. So you could use Q dilemmas instead of regular dilemmas. You have cards such as Planet, so you can nullify the next seed card at the location, or rather your opponent can. If he does choose to nullify, lose points. Otherwise, if that seed card turns out to stop, disable, or put in stasis any of your personnel, you lose points. Either way, it's not a very fun situation. The other dilemmas, I'm not going to get into all of them, but they're all pretty interesting cards. They do different things and they add a new facet to the game. So it's almost like Q is on your space line screwing with you and your opponent as you're going through the game. The interrupts are the same deal. You'd pull these out like a regular interrupt, either in conjunction with the Q flash or with your side deck. And there's different things that these cards do. So for example, subsection Q paragraph 10. Every player with more than 10 cards in hand loses 1 point for each card in excess of 10. So if you're at the stage of the game where you're drawing cards or you've had cards drawn due to other cards, you're going to have a bad time. Or lemonade. If you are at least 20 points ahead of your opponent, graciously give this card to opponent who scores bonus points, which is 5. May not be nullified. If that don't hurt you, I don't know what will. And one of my all-time favorites, Wesley gets the point. If you have Wesley Crusher present or on any planet, he scores bonus points and dies. So you lose a personnel, but you gain a point, and it is Wesley. Shut up, Wesley. And finally, the Q events. There's a lot of good Q events. I have 3 out here. You have military privilege. Plays on table until any Q flash. All Federation and online personnel in play with officer classification are now civilian. So you play that on your opponent and it really screws him from completing a mission. Into the breach. Plays on table until any Q flash. While in play, nullifies all Warp Core breach cards and immediately repairs all damaged ships in play except the Borg ship. Ooh. Penalty box is pretty good too. Basically, you're putting an occupant out of play and replace it with a new victim that's a random selection, and then you discard the event. The Q icon cards are a really good way to mix up the game. This was one of my favorite things in the early expansions, was the whole Q Continuum expansion set. Not just for the side deck, but the fact that it's almost like Q's running amok. And if you're not laughing at the carnage being done by the Q cards, you have a massive headache. Now, that all being said, there is one downfall with the Q Continuum expansion as a whole and the Q icon cards. If you are planning to use them in a deck, you really have to be careful in your deck construction. Because as I mentioned earlier, these add a whole new dimension to gameplay. You're going to have many Q flashes in said deck, and your Q's 10 side deck is going to have to contain some of these if you want to use them or counter what your opponent's doing, or just become a general pain in the ass up and down the space line. And you have to choose wisely because you don't want to overload your deck with the Q icon cards either. So It's all about balance, right? Have a great day, everybody.